Today I'll be talking about a few different things. First, is it possible to make your baby a genius? And if so, how? Secondly, if you can make your baby a genius, and spoiler alert, you can, do you want to make him a genius? And what exactly does that mean? That gets a little bit more nuanced, and we'll spend some time there. So first off, it's important to understand how babies' brains work. When a baby is born, they've got oodles of neurons and brain material, but they don't have many connections. Think of their brain as being unwired. And then over time, their brain, different connections are made and their brain becomes wired. So now here's the frightening part. By the time a baby is 1 year old, their brain is 70% wired. 70%! They haven't even given you any feedback yet. The first year, and if you're a first-time parent, I hate to disillusion you, a baby is basically a digestive tract with an attitude for about the first year. They don't play with you. Maybe peekaboo if you're lucky. Mostly they just, that's what they are. They're just a little bad attitude digestive tract, or at least a lot of mine were. But 70% of the brain wiring happens during that first year. 90% happens by the age of 3, and by the time they're 7 or 8 years old, their brain's pretty well done cooking. They can learn new stuff, but the overall structure of their brain is formed. You find out about how this works when things go wrong. So, for example, they had an issue in Eastern European orphanages where a disproportionate number of children were colorblind. And genetically, they were not supposed to be colorblind. And what they found was that these babies there was no color in the orphanage. They had gray walls, they had gray blankets, they ate gray food. It was just, there was no color. Their brain did not have to process color data. And so as a result, it weeded out the ability to process color data. And so that's how a baby's brain becomes wired, it is exposed to data which forces the baby's brain to learn how to process it. So if you expose your baby to a ton of color data, then they'll be able to see color. It doesn't weed out that ability. Just a random tidbit for you. There's a scene in Rain Man where they knock a box of toothpicks onto the ground, and he asks, how many are there? Oh, there's 246. He asks the waitress, how many are there? Oh, there's 250. So you were close. And she says, well, but there's 4 in the box. The ability to instantly compute large numbers, babies have, but it gets weeded out around the age 3. If it doesn't receive data by the age of about 3, that ability gets weeded out. Which, who's exposing their kid to that when they're that young? Which leads me to where we're going in a minute. Can you make your baby a genius? Can you make them super, super smart? And but I have to define that. Can you make them very good at computing stuff? Can you make them really good at math? And the answer is yes. And you can teach a 1-year-old to read. My sister could read when she was 18 months. It was and it's not because she was genetically special. It's because I was born about 13, 14 months after she was, and my mom would sit and read with her. And so she was exposed to that type of data. Her brain adapted and learned how to process it. There was a neurosurgeon. His name was Glenn Doman, and his job was rehabilitating children who had undergone traumatic brain injuries. A 4-year-old or a 5-year-old would suffer a brain injury, and then they'd bring him to him saying, can you get, we just want our kid to be functional in society, etc. And usually by the time they reached the age of 5, the children he was working with were not only caught up, but well ahead of their peers. And so he said, what happens if instead of starting with a 4-year-old, I start with a 3-year-old? Or a 2-year-old, or a 1-year-old, or an infant? And so he started working with progressively younger and younger children teaching them math, teaching them pattern recognition, teaching them music, teaching them playing musical instruments, etc. And he found that no, that babies' brains are so adaptable that you really can't outrun them, provided you know how to approach it in the right way. And he wrote some books on, how to teach your baby to read, how to teach your baby math, how to have an academically gifted child, and so on. And basically, it consists of, there's a couple of principles. I'll go ahead and give you a little tidbit. You can look up the books, but the trick is to stop before the baby wants to stop. You want to leave the baby hungry for more. If you're pushing this on the kid, it's not fun for them. They're not going to do it. It's not gonna last. So if you're doing flashcards with your kids, I had one son who loved dinosaur flashcards, and I'd lay him out, and he'd identify the different animals and stuff, and I'd gather them up, and I made a point of always stopping before he wanted to stop. That way he wanted to do it again. Oh, we'll do it tomorrow. Don't worry. And the next day he'd remind me, and so there's. So that's the trick, is to stop before they want to stop. And it basically just exposes them to the type of data you want. And there's books on it. Look up Glenn Doman. That's not what this is about. I'm not going to go into that in detail today. But what I do want to go into is this a good idea? So he wrote his books in the early 80s, if memory serves. And in his books, he was saying, these children, you will hear about these kids. They're 2 years old and they're doing calculus. These people will make an impact. Well, the internet existed, so I started seeing if I could look up some of his students. And I found a few of them. And they weren't running Disney and IBM and other big corporations or anything like that. They were very smart. They had done very well in school. But they weren't out inventing cold fusion and changing the world like he had expected. Okay, and I'm being unfair. He didn't actually use that as an example. And as I entered the workforce, one of the things that I noticed is that having a calculator brain didn't make you the boss. There were other skills. Maybe your boss might have a calculator brain, but that's not the trait that made them make him the boss. If that makes sense. There's a lot of these soft skills that people have to learn. I mean, what makes you a boss is that you're good with people. So how do you train that? That's there's some food for thought there. So the question is it a good idea to train your kid in that way? There were some parents who, he set up an academy where you could go and make your kids smart, and I think the academy's probably still there. I don't know. But anyway, some parents left in a huff saying, it's just, we want to have fun. We want our kids to have fun too. I mean, we skipped flashcards on Christmas and they yelled at us type of stuff. So, in fact, there was a book written, I believe, called No Time for Jello. And I mean, the title says it all. I mean, yeah, you can have a calculator brain. You can have somebody with photographic memory. You can train someone to do that. But do you want to? Is that going to make them successful? So that got me looking into that a little bit further. So if calculator brain isn't the goal, what is the goal? And it turns out that there's a doctor. His last name is White, and I always get his, and he goes, I think it's E.B. White or something, or maybe that's an author. I get the Whites mixed up. He wrote a book about a baby's first 3 years, and what he did, he conducted a study. He worked at a university, and basically he just brought moms in and said, here's an area for moms and kids to be together, and he paid them for their time for being there. And he didn't give them any direction or anything like that. And what they did is observed how the moms interacted with their babies. And then they observed the children over time, and they found that most kids left on either a high, medium, or low trajectory. High performing, average performing, or low performing. And whatever trajectory they were on at age 3, 4, 5, that's the trajectory they were on in high school and college. I mean, it's because, again, that's when your brain is getting formed, when your brain is getting wired. What is it going to be good at? And so babies whose brains were put on a high trajectory at that age stayed on that high trajectory. And they were just high-functioning, smart people. You've met them. You know who they are. You've also, I mean, it's sad to say, you've met the low trajectory people who just always struggled. Their brain just wasn't set up to do the type of stuff that some academics require. So they observed these trajectories, and then they looked at what type of interaction with the mom put children on which trajectory. And honestly, it had to do with how much attention the mom paid to their child. A lot of times, the parent would just sit there and do homework and kind of ignore the crying baby. Don't want to disparage the mom. I mean, single moms don't have an easy time. She might not have had the wherewithal or the ability to give the kid as much time as she wanted. But moms who reacted to their baby and spent time interacting with their baby and so on, they left on a high trajectory, and it was kind of that simple. And now here's the part that I thought was really cool. Babies are largely self-wiring. There's a mechanism that's built in that Mother Nature doesn't want to take chances on whether or not a kid's going to be smart or whether the brain's going to form correctly. So there's this little mechanism where if a baby is getting data that it needs, it will laugh. And, a lot of stuff, I was talking earlier about how you have to just expose the brain to enough data for the brain to wire itself. So I'll give one example, object permanence. Object permanence means, it's the notion that something still exists if you can't see it. It's the first abstract thought concept that little humans are introduced to. And so it's kind of a precursor to speech, to reading, to writing, to all of these other, to symbols, all these other abstract concepts. Object permanence is the first. Peekaboo is a game of object permanence. What happens when you play peekaboo with a baby? Say peekaboo and the baby just laughs and laughs and laughs. Which makes the mom do what? It makes the mom do it again. So the baby's saying, whoa, I need more of that data. It's laughing. The mom's laughing. They're both having a great time. And Mother Nature's winning. That baby's brain is getting wired the way it needs to be wired. And so just being a caring mom was enough to put the baby on a high trajectory. Responding to what made the baby laugh. Trying to make the baby laugh. Trying to make the baby happy. That worked. It wasn't about the flashcards unless the baby loved flashcards, unless it made the baby, laugh doing flashcards. Something to think about. Does your baby laugh watching TV? Probably not. I mean, do you laugh on a roller coaster? Yeah, that's because your brain's experienced something, new data that it hasn't had before, so you're laughing, anyway. So that's a gauge. It kills me to see parents who will put their kid in the car seat and just let him sit there like their whole first year. And the baby wants to play and goos and coos and does what it can, but anyway, that was the difference between a high, medium, and low trajectory. So if you're a mom and you're just spending time with your kids and you've got these little chatterboxes who follow you around the house and make you crazy, and your life centers around these little kids, or if you're a dad in the same situation, apologize, I'm just writing from the perspective of that, or speaking from the perspective of that book, which focused on moms. But that's it. You're feeding their curiosity. find stuff that makes him laugh. That's also why, by the way, after you've heard a joke once or twice, if you're slow, twice, it's not funny anymore. It's just that first time where it wrinkles your brain, hits it with it from a new angle that you laugh. After that, no, I get it. I already understand it. There's no new data. That's life for a baby. Just so much stuff is just new. I mean, I remember watching a baby laugh pulling Kleenex out of a box. It would pull one out, and there's another one there. Just that looks like the one they pull out. They laughed for 20 minutes until the box of Kleenex was empty. But it's a simple trick. If something is making your child laugh, this is like age 0 to 3. If something is making them laugh, that's good for them. Your baby knocks your bottle onto the ground. Mom or dad picks, they knock it onto the ground and they laugh and laugh and laugh because it fell. Mom or dad picks it up, the baby knocks it off again and laughs and laughs and laughs. Mom, and the parents think it's funny and put it up, and the baby keeps knocking it down, and they go until the baby's bored with it. Well, that's what a successful brain wiring process looks like. Now, here's something to think about. If you're in a situation where you're not able to watch your child during the day, who do you want watching them? There may not be a good answer to that, but that's a way of keeping score. Is it somebody who's going to pick the bottle back up and let them keep knocking it down if they're laughing about it? Does the person who's raising your child care enough about them? That's why the mom loves her child. The dad loves his child. That's why when they knock the bottle down, they'll pick it up and let them knock it down again. They just love to watch their baby laugh. We're hardwired that way. We're not necessarily hardwired that way with everybody, but we are with our own kids. Anyway, that's just something to think about. And I realize I'm probably stepping on toes, and I don't mean to, but if you want your child to be smart, that's how you do it. If you want to make him a calculator brain, you can. There's books on that. Look up Glenn Doman. But if you just want to have a sharp kid who's on a high trajectory, and who's perhaps very good in other areas, I mean, that's the problem with training a calculator brain, is there's like a billion different ways of being smart. And you'll pick one area to make them smart, which happens to be the same area that tons of other people are smart. Anyway, they'll be a very useful tool in somebody else's toolbox. Just make a smart kid overall. This has been a long video. If you're interested in this type of stuff, click subscribe, let me know, and I will talk to you later.